Okay, we're going to talk about fueling. Let's talk about, so to make one of these engines go, we have to suck dinosaurs, dead, decomposed dinosaurs out of the ground. We have to pump in a fuel tank, and the fuel goes in, and the fuel is what happens to combine with the air to create the bang. So there is a whole list of things that combine to enable that to happen. In a direct fuel injected car, a DFI engine, there are, and we hit on this briefly, so I'm going to go through it real quick so that you guys don't have to hear Charles and I expound on this, and we'll come back to it in a future episode in more detail. There is a low pressure fuel pump. The low pressure fuel pump is also called a lift pump. A lift pump is the thing that sits in your gas tank or in some location related to your gas tank, and it pulls the fuel out of the gas tank and it sends it off on its way to the engine.
It's basically the same. They define it specifically because they have two style fuel pumps. Every other car out there built not DFI has just the one fuel pump. They call it separate low pressure fuel pump or lift pump because they have the high pressure pump. So it's not that it's anything special. It's the same. You could take a 991 GT3 low pressure pump that's in the tank, and you could pull it out and get one from a 996 GT3 and put it in. It'd probably do the same thing. So
I mean, I remember in my supercharged G39 M5, I ran out of fuel pump, which means that the amount of mass flow that was getting the engine, notice I didn't say volumetric flow, mass flow, the amount of mass of fuel that was getting to the engine was not enough for what it needed for the injectors and the amount of fuel that it was consuming at the time, which mass flow is the combination of volume and pressure. So you can run higher pressure, but if you run out of volume, then your fuel pump is still going to not be adequate, and you're going to end up starving the engine. A high pressure fuel pump. What is high pressure in a high pressure fuel pump?
like the number?
Like the number.
Like 2,000 PSI.
It's a big number. A low pressure fuel pump, even a very high performance low pressure fuel pump, is in the low triple digits for pressure.
Well, especially on a turbo engine where it's running a rising rate pressure regulator, yeah.
Right, and to clarify this further, because somebody's going to eviscerate me in the comments, the pump is pumping volume. The pressure regulator is handling the pressure. So the pressure regulator needs to be fed, and it is controlling how much pressure is being pushed in. So there's a volume component and there is a pressure component. So
and a lot of times these get very mixed up or used incorrectly, because when you have volume and you're just thinking water hose, garden hose, and you're just spraying water. You have a volume of cubic feet per second or minute or whatever the rate is. Well, at that point, if you measure the pressure there, maybe it's nothing.
Well, it's very low.
If you take your, I'm just going to use the house part of this, if you put a gauge on the water spout of the house, it's probably, I think, code is 40 to 80 PSI. So it's 60 PSI. It's got pressure, but you're not flowing any
meaningful volume.
Nothing.
Right.
So pressure is, again, basics. Pressure is restriction to flow.
Pressure
so if you have
restriction to flow.
60 PSI base fuel pressure, you can have a pump that might be able to do 60 PSI, but you can't flow enough volume of fuel, mass flow, and retain that pressure. And that pressure is important because in a port injected engine, we'll get to the high pressure stuff. You need the pressure differential from fuel at high pressure, even if it's only 60 PSI, high pressure to dump into the intake port to low pressure. You need the pressure drop. But if you're making
otherwise it doesn't squirt.
Otherwise it does. Well, it'll trickle.
It'll trickle.
But you need the pressure differential for atomization. You need the not liquid fuel to burn. So if you have an engine that's now making, say you're doing 400 horsepower at that, and now you crank the boost up or something like everybody else does.
Now it's 600.
Now you're 600 horsepower, and your engine is leaning out and your fuel pressure is dropping. Means your fuel pump can't push enough mass of fuel and retain that pressure, because you have to have that pressure to create the pressure drop to help with fuel atomization. So in a high pressure fuel pump, it's the same. I don't want to say the same concept.
It's the same concept.
But we're raising it just like in a diesel engine where you're going 2,000 to 3,000 PSI. Well, now you have 3,000 PSI. that you have to inject fuel. In an old diesel engine, it's mechanical. You have actually a cam lobe and a finger follower that goes on it, and it physically pushes down and it injects fuel in.
Right.
And it'll be 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 psi usually.
Sure.
But you have that restriction. But you still need to push the volume of fuel through it. So every mechanical fuel pump that I've seen, direct fuel injection, it's gear driven, camshaft driven, and it's a hard style pump, kind of like an oil pump.
You hit on a really good point, Charles, because we're talking about, so I'm sure there's a misconception that liquid gasoline goes into the cylinder and liquid gasoline is somehow set on fire, like you're seeing propane on your stove get lit on fire, which are now illegal in California, or propane or natural gas or whatever. What the hell? I mean, fine. Liquid gasoline will not burn at the right rate. It will burn, but it will not burn at the rates that we're looking at. So what we're looking to do is we're looking to combine the gasoline and the air in a homogeneous mixture at a certain concentration to be able to light it off with an ignition source.
Real quick for those that don't know, explain homogeneous.
Okay, homogeneous would mean kind of like milk. When you take milk and it has cream and it has milk. A homogeneous milk, a 2% homogeneous milk means that it's already been shaken up. It's already, generally throughout the entire bottle, you're gonna find 2% fat and 98% water soluble milk throughout its entire volume without having to shake it up. Non-homogenized milk means you have to shake that bitch up because the cream is all at the top and the rest of the water is at the bottom. Kind of the same thing with fuel and air. You're looking for a completely dispersed in the cylinder gasoline, little atoms of gasoline and air.
It's kind of like the homogeneous thing. That's why I was like, I was like,
right. You're like,
example.
Define that term.
If you put all the fuel in the chambers,
you put it all on one side
and all the oxygen on the other, it would only burn where they meet.
Right.
But then it is possible to burn the oxygen, and it's not. Remember, in the chamber, it's not 100% oxygen. It's oxygen, nitrogen, argon.
Yep.
You have atmospheric gases in there.
Yep.
You have to deal with.
Yep.
Well, only the oxygen's going to burn. Then you have the
and
nitrogen.
oxygen is the minority in that.
Correct. The
Argon's
nitrogen,
really minority, but close enough.
Yeah. But floor, all the other
3-4%. So there's a bunch of other ones, but fine.
Everything along that wall where they meet is not that it is going to burn. That's the only spot where that could burn.
Right.
In theory, because you need the oxygen.
Because combustion is an oxidation reaction for all of you chemists and chemical engineers out there.
Actually, and the fun one for all the chemical engineers out there is do the chemical math on combustion in a perfect environment.
Yeah, and it's very different than what's happening in a piston.
Only oxygen,
correct,
and only hydrocarbon,
right,
fuel,
and it's different than nitrogen. Hence, nitrous oxide and nitrogen oxides and all of the oxides of nitrogen that happen. And that's a whole other conversation for another day.
I did that math once years ago, and I thought I was wrong. I was like, this
can't be right.
And then found a paper online
it's actually
about it.
Right.
I was like, oh, yeah, that would have just broken everything.
Yeah, that's just going to boom. Yeah, oxygen as a fuel is really cool, but it's also very unstable.
Yeah, something where I was going to go with the molecules, which we can just do a diagram of this. That's another visual aspect, visual aid, is when old school has the spark plug on the edge or on the piston. It's on the side of the chamber.
Yeah.
And the burn starts from the spark plug.
Sure.
There are limits to back in the day, if I call this. Even 90s,
60s,
2000,
50s.
it can only be your compression
dating
ratio.
Myself.
Your compression ratio, you're limited.
Yep.
You might detonate, knock, whichever. Well, we have technology now for all that. We'll get to that in a minute.
Yep.
Where we have knock control, we can monitor, knock, make adjustments for it. But spark plug on the outer edge here kind of just sucks.
Yeah.
Actually, the injector being down here on the bottom actually isn't even perfect either.
Yeah, it's not great, but they can't package it.
Spark plug in the middle.
Spark plug and ignition source in the middle would be great, but they're occupying the same space.
Also called a direct injection diesel engine.
Yeah.
So if you have
doesn't
the
have an
chamber,
igniter,
when you're compressing all the air and fuel, you want, in theory, you want all the air and the fuel to go into the cylinder. I'm just going to leave it this way, and gets compressed. And in a perfect world where they have 14.7 to 1 air fuel ratio, which that's the
stoichiometric ratio, which we'll define another time. Just
the
use
perfect
those numbers.
World, that's the number where every 14.7 oxygen molecules, you had a fuel molecule. And if you had them spaced evenly, not just three-dimensionally, because if you line them all up like gasoline in a row and it burned, it's going to burn in a line.
Yep.
And then if you put it all in a ring and you let it from one spot, it's going to burn in a circle. Yep. So you could take 100 molecules, line it up, and burn it, or put it in a circle and burn it. And in a circle, it burns twice as quick because you're burning 2 rows at a time.
Yep.
Well, eventually, you want to keep stacking those, packing those closer together, and you get to a sphere.
Which is
ideal. You take the sphere, just a round 2-dimensional sphere, and you keep packing it, and then you get to a structure.
Yep.
Essentially 3-dimensional, I can't think of that word.
A toroid?
Just the
that's fine.
Another. But you get to it where you eventually, when you start, burn from the middle, not from like the top of the sphere.
Yeah, okay.
But you'll
the
burn,
centroid. Yeah.
And then as that burn happens outward, you burn everything evenly. Well, that's perfect world.
Yeah, that's the math in a perfect world that never happens in an engine.
And that doesn't happen. So then there's other issues where people are like, hey, why do you have to run a richer, more air fuel ratio? 12 to 1 is what a lot of aftermarket old school guys would shoot for.
Yep.
Why is that better? Why does that make more power?
Oh man, we took a rabbit hole.
So I'm not going down here.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. We will have to come back to that.
All of this,
because that's an important thing to.
This all has to deal with one simple thing in the word homogeneous.
Yes.
Where everyone doesn't shoot for. I'm saying it this way. Everyone doesn't shoot for a homogeneous burn. Everyone shoots for more horsepower. Yes. They just want to pack more air and more fuel in there and burn it.
Homogeneous would mean there's no fuel left over.
Correct.
Meaning that you burned it, you consumed all of the fuel, and this is more akin. So, okay, we got to take a side squirrel here. So,
I think you're about to take it deeper than I was going to.
Yeah, but it's important because the guys are going to get lost. It's like, why is that important? What's a rich or a lean mixture? What does that mean?
All of this has the one word this all has to deal with is efficiency.
Yes.
It's not,
and it's
you can take
it's chemical efficiency,
LS3,
it's thermal efficiency, it's all the efficiencies.
Take a 6.2 liter LS3. They're out there. You can get the E-Rod kit. I've played with them before.
Yep.
They make 500 horsepower with just a couple things done to them, and they pass emissions, plug-in emissions.
Yep.
With cats and everything, it's fine.
They
make plenty of power. Well, that's 500 horsepower out of 6.2 liters versus Porsche's 500 horsepower out of a 4-liter motor, or in our case, our Cup car, which makes quite a bit more than that.
Yep.
So that's several stages of efficiency. But everyone in the aftermarket world just tries to do it what I call the old school way of just cram more air and fuel in there, light it on fire, cross your fingers. Cool, we didn't break.
Right.
We didn't break and we made power.
Right.
Hopefully it doesn't break. But what if everything you just did right there was inefficient, not in the aspect of turbo math or whatever else. But what if you could have taken everything, all the air fuel that's in there, and you burned it better, more correctly?
Yes.
And you could have made 600 horsepower instead of 500 horsepower with
that's
no
where
other changes
DFI comes from.
other than one of them, than just literally lining up the air and fuel molecules.
Yeah.
So how do you get all the air and fuel molecules lined up correctly? It's not just like
more efficiently.
Yeah. Easier, quicker, faster.
Yep.